here we are back in the garage, and I am working on the Wilwood rear disc brake conversion for this car. Already went through the front disc brakes on this thing, talked about how this car originally came with four-wheel drum brakes. So I just got the Wilwood disc brake kit it was delivered yesterday. I started messing around with one side just to kind of figure out what I'm doing, so I'm not looking like a complete moron here on camera when I'm trying to walk you through this. So this particular kit is a two-piece rear rotors. So they include the kit. Let me go through this kit here real quick. This kit includes a parking brake. So this is the backing plate that your caliper's going to mount off of, and you'll notice it's got what looks like a conventional drum brake here, just a lot smaller. So that's actually going to be the parking brake. Just a small little drum brake that sits inside the rear rotor hat. So this goes on your axle. Inside of this is a small drum, so that is your parking brake. Most modern cars that have, I should say most modern American cars that are rear wheel disc brake have got something similar set up to this as far as the parking brake goes. So I can tell you for a fact the Ford Crown Vic cop cars are set up exactly the same way. So this is going to get mounted on our axle housing. I'll relocate things here once I'm ready for that. But as you can see, my rear disc brake is not actually a disc at the moment. So what I need here is the hat, the rotor hat, and then the actual rotor. So this is a large diameter rear rotor, not a lot of swept area on it, fairly thin there, but it is a very large diameter rotor. It's going to have way more braking power and stay way cooler than the factory rear drum brakes would have. So what I need to do here is assemble the complete rear rotor package. So I'm going to pause this camera here for a moment, reposition it so you can actually see what I'm doing. Alright, well, you won't be able to see my pretty face, but oh well, you can see what I'm doing. So the rear rotor hat fits right on the rear, or I should say the rotor fits right on the rotor hat. However, in order to put this thing together, I have to flip it upside down because the bolts that hold this all together come in from the back side of the rotor, and it's roughly lined up. So here's the package of bolts they give you. They are 12-point head bolts, so you're going to need a 12-point socket. These particular bolts for this kit are 5/16. They need a 5/16 socket. So let me open this package up so I can get to the bolts that I need. By the way, my crappy table here that has seen way better days has a few slivers hanging off of it, and those suck when they go under your fingernail. Alright, here we go. Try not to do that again. Over. Alright, so there's all the bolts and the washers that I'm going to need to put this together. And here's my Loctite. So this little tube is running a little bit low, so I just picked up a new larger tube since I'm going to be using quite a bit of this. And I've had this one around for a long time. So all I'm doing is putting one washer on each bolt. Throw some Loctite on the threads. Everything's all brand new, so I don't need to clean anything. I found it easier if I actually put it in the socket, because then I can get it down in there where I can't really fit my fingers and start the bolt. So this is going to get a little monotonous because there's quite a few of these, but now that you at least have the idea of how this stuff goes together, I can fast forward all the boring parts. Alright, just like magic, now we've got 12 bolts that are all installed here. The next thing I'm going to do is torque them. And Wilwood is very specific. Big warning label that came in the box with each rotor that says, make sure you use an inch-pound torque wrench when doing this. And the torque specs are 155 inch-pounds. I'm going to guess that maybe they had people trying to torque these to foot-pounds. I don't know. They're tiny little bolts. Anyway, but there's 12 of them holding it all together. So I'm going to go ahead and they're doing this in a cross pattern. So one here, one across. I'm going to do it just like if this was a lug nuts on a wheel. So I'm going to do a cross pattern, then I'm going to rotate, do another cross pattern. So now I'm just going to double check directly across from that one and next to it. This one should already be tight, and it is. So all of those are torqued to spec, to Wilwood's spec, 155 inch-pounds, actually 156. I couldn't get my torque wrench to exactly 155. Actually, speaking of that, I need to back it off. Before I put this away, just a word of warning to anybody out there. When you're storing torque wrenches, you should back them all the way off, not store them with a torque setting in there. Eventually, doing so for over a long period of time supposedly can cause the torque wrench to go out of spec. So, never hurts to be safe. All right, so there you can see it. All 12 of those bolts are now in place. I'm going to flip them over real quick, and I do have one that has a little bit of Loctite on the head, and since I don't want that dry bright red on there, I'm going to clean that off real quick. So the next step in this, according to Wilwood, is optional, is going to be to safety wire these bolts. So what you're doing is you're basically running, all the bolts are pre-drilled for safety wire. You're going to run wire through there. Hang on a second, I know I've got a diagram in here somewhere to kind of give you an idea. There it goes. So what you do is you're going to run the wire. Let's see if I can get this on camera here. Let's see if it'll focus. All right, so you run the wire through the head of one bolt, you wrap it there, you run it to the other bolt, you run it through the head of the bolt, and then you just twist it off. That prevents those two bolts from loosening up. So you're going to do that 6 times per rotor. So let me get some tools together here, and I'll be right back. All right, look at that. You can see even less than me. It's all better for you. All right, so we're going to talk about safety wire in here. I've mentioned in the very first installment of the Blue Boat blog that I was using one of my grandfather's tools. My grandfather, for those who've not heard it, my grandfather was a machinist for Aerojet back in the 60s. He actually worked on the rocket engines that put man on the moon. So I've got some pretty cool tools with some pretty neat history. One of those is this set of safety wire pliers here. These lock onto the wire that you're going to twist, and then when you pull on it, because of the shape of this, it actually, oops, could you see it? Yeah, there we go. So it twists the wire as you pull on the handle here. My grandfather told me, and I don't know if it's accurate, I got no reason to doubt my grandfather, I don't think he would lie to me, but he told me the guy who invented these worked at Aerojet with him, so he actually got this set for free. Anyway, so these twisted a whole bunch of safety wire on stuff that went to the moon. Pretty damn cool. Anyway, sorry, needed some coffee. All right, so I've got some safety wire here, stainless safety wire. I'm going to be going from one bolt to the adjacent bolt. I don't need a ton of wire, but I do need enough to double the length plus some, because you're going to lose length as it twists. So here's a section of safety wire. I don't know if you can even see that on camera. It's pretty thin stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it through this bolt here. If I can, there we go. because of where the holes are located, you can't really get a good look at them from once the bolts are installed. And you can't do this before the bolts are installed, or else you wouldn't be able to twist the bolts. So there's that. Feed that through. Want it about halfway. A little bit more. A little bit more still. Close enough. So then I'm going to fold that down and pull it tight. And then I'm going to lock the safety wire pliers here onto the wire, and you'll see how this works. So just lock that on there, pull this, and it twists the wire. I'm going to do it a couple times till I get enough twisted here. There we go. And looks like I may have gone, yep, I did a hair too long, so I'm just going to untwist a little bit of that to that point there. And then get one of these out of my way. This one is going to go through here and work its way up. This is going to be a tight fit because of where it's at. You know, I'm wondering. Sure enough. Okay, so they were smarter than me and actually have two sets of holes in here. So I don't have to fight it the direction I was going. I can fight it a different direction, which will be much less of a fight. So again, not everything goes perfectly as planned all the time. Sometimes, despite best efforts, I look like a moron on camera. But that's life, right? Nothing ever works perfect all the time. So needless to say, this is not going to be a super quick job here. I am definitely not going to torture you with watching me do this a whole bunch more times. So once I get this one done, we will pause the camera and then I'll come back once I get these all safety wired, like 17 hours from now. So there is that one. No, I am by no means a professional safety wire guy, so those guys who do a lot of racing, or especially motorcyclists, because a lot of stuff needs to be safety wired on those for racing, don't make fun of my safety wires. Anyway, or you can make fun of them, I don't care. I'm not that. Let's see here, if I can get the camera, there we go. Now let me just focus it. So, let's see here, one more try. There we go. Now you can kind of see what it looks like. So it goes through this bolt first, then you twist it, drag it over to the other bolt, run it through there, and then twist it off. What that does is it prevents the two bolts from backing out. So I've done 1 and 2 sets of bolts. I've got 4 more to go, and it's going to take me a while. So we'll come back once I'm all done with this, and then we'll start putting all the parts on the car. All right, here we are, rotors together. I'm all ready to start installing this stuff onto the actual axle. I am going to fire up my trusty handy dandy cell phone here, and I'm going to record a little bit of this while I talk about it, some close-ups with the cell phone camera. So let's get to it here real quick. So here's our axle flange. This is a Ford 9-inch axle. See if I can get that to focus. There we go. So there's unfortunately multiple different versions of a Ford 9-inch rear end. I guess it would help to see if the camera's focused if I have my glasses on and I can actually see what's in focus. So there's a Ford 9-inch rear end. I've already put inside the new axle seal. Different generations, different axles go together differently. Some of them, the seals are on the actual axle, some of them are in the housing. This particular one is in the housing. So we've got, you can see the 4 bolt holes here. The bolts are on the table over there. I'll grab them in a moment. They come in through the back side. This guy is going to go on from the front, and the bolts will hold it in place. The axle goes in through the backing plate with the parking brake on it. It's going to go in the shaft in the hole here. You got to line up the actual axle into the third member, which is, see if I got enough light to get this thing to focus way down in there. No, there's not. Let's see if I back up a little bit maybe. That's so great. There it is. You can actually see the third member way down in there. That's what the axle has to line up with on one end, and then the bearing is on the other end out here. So let's get to putting this thing together. Some of this is pretty grimy, greasy stuff. At least there's the bolts there. The tube, the actual axle shaft itself, I didn't bother cleaning. I mean, I wiped it down, I cleaned it a little bit, but it's still got some grease on it, and it's 90 weight, and it's stinky and doesn't come off very easily. So, rubber gloves. All right, here's the bolts that go through here and hold this all together. It's got a little bit of paint in it, there we go. Because I did repaint this axle housing after I did some welding on it. All right, so there's that. Then the next thing that goes on is going to be my parking brake backing plate here. So that guy sits just like that. The next thing that's going to go in is going to be my axle itself. And this is the retaining plate that goes on and holds the axle in place. So what you have to do with this guy is it has to slip in through here, and I found it much easier to do when you're holding the axle in your hand as opposed to when it's up on the car. Hang on one second, let me grab a rag here. I got a chunk of something on this axle. All right, there we go. Everything else in there is brand new. No sense introducing dirt into it. It doesn't need to be in there. So the fun part here is kind of doing this by feel. Get this parking brake cable out of my way. There we go. Because you can't really see what you're doing. And it's hard to tell if you got it straight. It's a little too high. Come on. There we go. All right, so that's going to go on like that. This is going to push in. The axle bearing is going to go into the housing a little bit. Then I'm going to put my retainer in place. This gets fun here because there's not a lot of room for your fingers to work as you do this. Thankfully, Ford does include this hole here, which is used for putting the hardware on and off. All right, axle's in, the retaining plate is in place. Now I just need to rotate the axle until I can see one of the bolts. There it is. So these guys require Loctite. You don't want them backing off. Hey, it works a lot better when there's an actual hole in the end of that. All right, let's see what we got here. It actually squeezes now, that's a plus. Yeesh. All right, there is some Loctite. This is actually not Loctite per se. This is Permatex thread locker, but it's the equivalent. All right, and I found that it's much easier to try and stick a magnet on a stick through this hole than it is for me to try and put my finger in there. And then I can get it just like half a revolution and it'll stay on the bolt, which it did. Now I can stick my finger in here. Spin it down finger tight anyway. And I'm going to give it a little extra snug. Not fully tight. There it is. All right, moving on to the next one. it snug. I will come back later in a few minutes here. Double check everything. Alright, last one. Alright, there is that. So, backing plate's installed, my axle is in. Alright, so we've got our assembled rotor with the safety wired attachment bolts there. That's all ready to go on. Our axle is in, the backing plate is on. The next thing I need to do is going to be to mount the caliper mounting bracket, which is this guy here, and it goes on one way. You'll notice much longer distance here, much shorter distance here. The shorter distance goes up. In addition to that, there is a little spacer you need to put on here. What that does is it aligns the caliper with your rotor once it's installed. There are some other things that we'll need to talk about here, and one of them I need to look at right now in the directions, because I forgot to look, is whether I need to use Loctite on the mounting bracket, the caliper mounting bracket mounting bolts. Okay, so appears, so I do have a couple complaints, Wilwood, if you're listening. One, on your website, the listing for this kit, it would have been nice to know in advance that I was going to need new parking brake cables. When I bought the front kit, it told me I needed the new the new hoses, which I would have replaced anyways, but it actually said those were necessary. When I bought this kit, it didn't say anything else was necessary, so I assumed it was just going to use stock, the factory parking brake cables. It does not, so I've got those on order. They'll probably be here this week. But it's telling me to use one shim between the bracket and the spacer during my initial test fitting. I've already done the initial test fit, so I could figure out what I was doing here, other than trying to figure out if I needed Loctite. And I don't need any shims. It does not say anything about Loctite on these 3 bolts. I'm going to Loctite them. I'm not going to use red Loctite though, because I don't need it to be permanent. So I'm going to go grab a bottle of blue Loctite. Correction, I'm not going to use blue. I'm going to use this orange, which is high strength, removable. The blue is kind of like a medium strength. So this is the spacer. This is the mounting bracket. Hopefully you can see this on camera. Mounting bracket, spacer. Those go together like that, and they go on the back side of that backing plate. I need to put some bolts in here. So there's a little bit of thread locker on that one. That's going to be my top one. Tell you what, so I don't keep wiping off the thread locker, I'm going to put them through here first, and then put the thread locker on here. They do want you to make sure they don't extend it into the brake area too far, because it could, nope, they don't, because it could interfere with your brake shoes, the parking brake shoes. And one thing I found doing the test fit here, that bottom bolt, you definitely have to put it in the bracket before you go to put it on the car, because at least with this particular car, the particular axle design, the shock mount is in the way, and you can't just insert that bottom bolt. So make sure you feed that through the mounting bracket before you try and put the mounting bracket on the backing plate.
3 hours later.
This is just a 1/4 inch bit. It was a little small flathead screwdriver bit. I broke the tip of the screwdriver off to shorten it. And then, so I'm going to take that. Here's one of the spare mounting bolts for the other side, because I haven't put it on yet. I'm going to stick it in there, and then I'm going to use my wrench to turn that one. Silly things you got to do sometimes. There's always a way around it. So there it is. Here's my 1/4 inch wrench. and I am just going to tighten this. Alright, those are all nice and tight. So the next thing I need to do is going to be to figure out what spacers I'm going to need. So what Wilwood tells you to do is on the caliper mounting bracket here, you're going to put one spacer top, one spacer bottom. That's their initial setting. As I mentioned, I've already gone through and test fit this once. The next thing I want to do is throw the rotor here up onto my axle, and to keep it from wobbling while I'm doing this, I've got a couple of lug nuts that I'm just going to screw on here until they bottom out, just to keep this from moving around on me. These don't need to be super tight. They're just holding the rotor in place so it doesn't wiggle. It's the axle in the housing. So there's that. It's got no side-to-side wiggle. So I know from test fitting this that I need actually 2 spacers per stud. So those guys go on there, and then my caliper just slides onto those mounting studs. And of course, this worked really well. There we go. So now it's bottomed out. If I hold it there, I should be able to turn this and not hear any metal-to-metal scraping. I can look in here and take a look at the gap, and it is pretty even. My preference would be to actually move it a little bit further out, but I don't have any way of doing that. It's gonna clear, it's just not perfectly centered. So the next thing I'm gonna do is throw some thread locker on these. Actually, I take it back, it said no thread locker. So the caliper mounting bolts are supposed to go on dry on clean dry threads. Those threads are all brand new, so they're clean and dry. And the bolts are sitting right here, or excuse me, the nuts are sitting right here. I just need to find a socket that fits this. So here's my socket. These are 7/16. So before the nut goes on, I need to put one of these washers on. And there's that. Let me grab my cell phone camera here and bring it in here so you can actually see what I'm doing. There we go. So right here and right here are the 2 caliper mounting studs. So there is the, if I can't do this while I'm holding my phone in my hand, there is one of the washers, and then this, I should say the second washer, and then the second nut. So there's the top nut, there's the bottom nut. Just for hand tightness purposes, I'm going to throw the socket on here, and I'm not going to be able to hand tighten those because those are actually lock nuts. So let me grab my ratchet here. I'm going to set my phone down in my little phone holder over here. See if I can angle it to where you can actually see what I'm doing. There we go. So there's that. Get my ratchet again. So I'm just going to tighten these guys up. Now, granted, I don't have the brake lines for these yet. I'm going to have to make those, but this is the actual installation of the kit, at least on the right side here, is almost done. Alright. Those are snug, nice and tight. All right, so again, testing, no grinding, no bad noises, no bad juju noises. So the next thing I'm going to do here is take this bar and bolt out, which will allow me to insert my brake pads. So here we have two brand new brake pads. One goes on that side, slides in, the other one goes on this side. Insert that brake pad into the caliper, and the nut is a 7/16, which is the same size as the ones that hold this caliper in place, so that makes that part easy. And all this thing does, it does not need to be snug. You're just tightening it until the lock nut engages. I mean, I'll go a little bit tighter than that because I don't want it rattling, but this is not doing anything other than, as long as the bolt doesn't fall out, it's keeping your brake pads from falling out the back of the caliper. So I just want to snug this down a little bit because I don't want it rattling around. So I'll get it to just the point where it's slightly snug, but not. So that allows that to still move, which tells me I have not pinched my caliper. And back here, hopefully you can see what I'm doing. I can't tell on the camera here, but the nut is far enough onto the bolt where the lock nut portion of it is engaging. It will not loosen up and back off. So there's that. The brake line goes in right here where my fingertip is at. So I'm going to have to make a metal brake line to run on my housing here. It will go from, got my camera here, sorry about my hand. So it's going to go from the back side of the caliper. You can see a little sticker there on the back of the caliper. It's going to go from there. It'll follow the housing itself over towards the differential. And then once you get up into here, on top of the differential, you can see right, see if I can get my finger in front of the camera, just above the tip of my finger there. That is where the two brake lines, you can see the two fittings there. That's where the brake lines screw into the hose that comes from the line that's coming from the front of the car. So I'll make those later, but for now, you can see my rear disc brake. If I can try to not trip over my engine stand here. So, there she blows, rear discs in place. And looking good if you ask me.